A war is being fought right now. But you won't see soldiers, you won't hear gunfire, you won't see tanks rolling through streets. This is a different kind of war. A war fought with keyboards and bank accounts, with sanctions and cyber attacks, with economic pressure so intense it can collapse a nation without firing a single shot. This is the story of how modern warfare has evolved into something invisible, something deadly, something that changes millions of lives while the world looks away. This is America versus Venezuela, the war you never knew was happening. Once upon a time, Venezuela was rich. Home to the world's largest proven oil reserves, bigger than Saudi Arabia's. In the 1970s and 80s, Caracas gleamed with wealth, South America's richest nation, a beacon of prosperity. Then came Hugo Chavez in 1998, promising a Bolivarian revolution, oil wealth for the people, not the elites. Poverty dropped, literacy soared, healthcare became free. But there was a cost. Chavez nationalized oil, kicked out American companies, challenged U.S. dominance in Latin America. And Washington never forgives. March 2013, Chavez dies of cancer and his chosen successor, Nicolás Maduro, takes power. But Maduro lacks Chavez's charisma, his political skill. And then the perfect storm. Global oil prices collapse in 2014. Venezuela's economy, dependent on oil for 95% of export revenue, begins to hemorrhage. Inflation explodes, food becomes scarce, medicine disappears. But was this just bad luck? Or was something else at play? In 2015, President Obama declares Venezuela an extraordinary threat to U.S. national security and imposes the first wave of sanctions. The invisible war had begun. Sanctions, the word sounds so bureaucratic, so harmless. But sanctions are weapons of mass destruction, just in slow motion. The United States begins cutting Venezuela off from the global financial system. Venezuelan officials can't access U.S. banks. Companies can't do business with Venezuela without risking American punishment. Venezuela can't sell its oil, can't buy food, can't import medicine. By 2017, Trump escalates banning Venezuela from U.S. financial markets, freezing billions in assets. By 2019, complete oil embargo. The result? Venezuela's economy collapses by 65% in just 5 years, worse than the Great Depression, worse than the Soviet Union's collapse. But this was no accident, this was designed. Meet Dr. Maria Rodriguez. She's worked at Caracas General Hospital for 23 years. "We operate without anesthesia now," she says. "Can you imagine cutting into a patient while they scream because we have no pain medication? Dialysis machines sit silent because there are no spare parts. American sanctions block medical equipment imports. Children die of treatable cancers because chemotherapy drugs can't enter the country. Infant mortality has tripled. Malnutrition affects 1 in 3 children. And here's the thing they don't tell you. Sanctions include humanitarian exemptions for food and medicine. But banks won't process the transactions, terrified of U.S. penalties. Insurance companies won't cover shipments. The exemptions are meaningless. The suffering is very real. Over 7 million Venezuelans have fled their country since 2015. Let that number sink in. 7 million people. That's more refugees than Syria at the height of its civil war. They walk for weeks, crossing mountains, sleeping on roadsides, begging for food. Maria, 32, walked 1,200 kilometers to Colombia with her 2 children. "We had no choice," she says. "My daughter needed insulin. In Venezuela, there was none. She would have died." But was this mass migration natural or engineered? Former UN Special Rapporteur Alfred de Zayas investigated. His conclusion: the sanctions created a humanitarian crisis, possibly constituting crimes against humanity. His report was largely ignored by Western media. But economic warfare wasn't enough. In 2018, a drone carrying explosives detonates near Maduro during a military parade. The plot, Venezuela claims, traces back to Florida. January 2019, A little-known opposition politician, Juan Guaido, declares himself interim president, despite never winning an election. Within minutes, the United States recognizes him as Venezuela's legitimate leader. Over 50 countries follow America's lead. Guaido promises American companies access to Venezuela's oil if he takes power. But there's one problem: he has no actual power in Venezuela. April 2019, Guaido attempts to spark a military uprising. It fails within hours. The coup that wasn't quite a coup, but was backed by Washington all the same. May 2020, the most bizarre chapter yet. 8 men land on Venezuela's coast in speedboats, armed with assault rifles. Their mission: kidnap or kill President Maduro. But Venezuelan forces are waiting. Firefight, 8 dead, 13 captured. And among the prisoners, 2 American ex-Green Berets. The operation was organized by a Florida security contractor named Jordan Gaudreau, who posted videos online advertising the plot. Contracts emerged showing Guaido's signature, agreeing to pay millions for the operation. Washington denies involvement, calling it a rogue operation. But the captured Americans tell Venezuelan interrogators they were promised immunity by U.S. officials. Truth, lies, in this invisible war nothing is clear. Except that American citizens attempted a military invasion of a sovereign nation, and barely anyone noticed. March 7, 2019, 3:47 p.m. Venezuela goes dark. The entire country loses power, 23 of 24 states completely black. The blackout lasts 6 days in some areas. Hospitals lose life support, water pumps stop, food spoils. The government blames a U.S. cyber attack on the Guri Dam hydroelectric plant, which provides 80% of Venezuela's electricity. The U.S. denies it, blaming poor maintenance. But here's what we know. Edward Snowden revealed the NSA has programs specifically designed to attack electrical grids. The United States openly discusses offensive cyber operations against adversaries. And just months before the blackout, Marco Rubio and other U.S. senators discussed targeting Venezuela's power grid. Coincidence, or the invisible war's most devastating strike yet? Here's where it gets complicated. While publicly strangling Venezuela with sanctions, the U.S. quietly continued buying Venezuelan oil through loopholes until 2019. American refineries on the Gulf Coast were designed specifically for Venezuela's heavy crude. Chevron maintained operations in Venezuela even after the embargo granted special exemptions. Why? Because American companies make money from Venezuelan oil, and because completely cutting off Venezuela might drive them entirely into the arms of America's real rivals, Russia and China. China has loaned Venezuela $60 billion since 2007. Russia has invested billions in oil projects. Both nations have military agreements with Caracas. The invisible war isn't just about toppling Maduro. It's about controlling Latin America's largest oil reserves and keeping China and Russia out of America's backyard. The Monroe Doctrine never died, it just got digital. Turn on any Western news channel and you'll hear the same story. Dictator Maduro, ruined economy, humanitarian crisis, people desperate for American liberation. All of it true and all of it incomplete. What you won't hear: that Venezuela has held multiple elections, observed by international monitors, which Maduro's party won contested, yes, but not definitively fraudulent. That the U.S. backed a military dictatorship before Chavez brought democracy. That in 2002, the CIA backed a coup that briefly ousted Chavez, a coup that failed when hundreds of thousands took to the streets demanding his return. Both sides weaponize information. Maduro controls Venezuelan media, suppresses opposition voices. But the United States runs Voice of America and Radio Marti, broadcasting anti-government messages into Venezuela 24/7. Both sides deploy bot armies online, spreading propaganda and disinformation. In the invisible war, truth is the first casualty, and we, the audience, struggle to know what's real. Venezuela is not alone. This playbook is familiar. Iraq, sanctions in the 1990s killed 500,000 children according to UN estimates, then invasion in 2003. Libya, sanctions, no-fly zone, regime change, now a failed state. Syria, sanctions, covert arms to rebels, ongoing warfare. Iran, decades of sanctions, assassination of scientists, cyber attacks on nuclear facilities. Cuba, 60 years of economic embargo. Nicaragua, targeted sanctions, support for opposition. The pattern is clear. When a nation refuses U.S. dominance, particularly over resources like oil, the invisible war begins. And here's the bitter irony. While U.S. officials accuse Venezuela of human rights violations, experts argue the sanctions themselves violate international law. The UN Charter prohibits using economic coercion to change a government. Yet no one at the International Criminal Court investigates American officials for the deaths caused by sanctions. In the invisible war, the powerful write the rules. But Venezuela has not collapsed entirely, despite Washington's best efforts. In the face of apocalyptic economic warfare, Venezuelans have built networks of survival. Community kitchens feed neighborhoods. Urban farms spring up in vacant lots. People create cryptocurrency systems to bypass blocked banks. The government's CLAP program distributes subsidized food boxes to 6 million families monthly, criticized for being political, but keeping people alive. Cuban doctors fill hospitals where Venezuelan physicians fled. Russia ships wheat. Iran sends fuel tankers defying U.S. threats. The invisible war was designed to break Venezuela quickly, to force regime change through suffering. But after nearly a decade, Maduro remains. The war has failed to achieve its primary objective, though it has succeeded in immiserating millions. Is that victory, or something darker? Carlos was a petroleum engineer in Maracaibo. He earned good money, owned a home, sent his kids to private school. I wasn't political, he says. I just wanted to live my life, provide for my family. But the invisible war doesn't care about your politics. When his salary became worthless, when his savings evaporated to hyperinflation, when his daughter's diabetes medication disappeared from every pharmacy, he had no choice. He left everything. Now he's in Bogotá, working construction for dollars a day, living in a room with 5 other men, sending money home when he can. My wife and daughter are still there, he says. I haven't seen them in 2 years. This invisible war, it destroyed my family, and no one even knows it's happening. Multiply Carlos by 7 million. That's the human cost that never makes the headlines. 2021, Biden administration, new president, same policy. The sanctions continue. The isolation continues. The suffering continues. But cracks appear. In 2022, facing high gas prices from the Ukraine war, U.S. officials quietly meet with Maduro. Chevron gets expanded licenses to pump Venezuelan oil. Suddenly, when America needs the oil, the extraordinary threat doesn't seem so threatening. The dictator becomes someone you can negotiate with. In 2024, Venezuela holds presidential elections. Maduro claims victory. The opposition claims fraud. International observers give conflicting reports. Protests erupt. The government cracks down. The cycle continues. And the question remains, what was this all for? 7 million refugees, tens of thousands dead from preventable diseases, an economy in ruins, a nation traumatized. Did regime change happen? No. Did democracy flourish? No. Did suffering occur? Yes. Massive, undeniable, generational suffering. In the invisible war, everyone loses, except perhaps those who profit from instability. The invisible war against Venezuela continues today as you watch this. Right now, sanctions are being enforced. Right now, Venezuelan children are going hungry. Right now, families are being torn apart. But the deeper story is this. We live in an age where wars are fought without declaring them, where economic weapons can be more devastating than bombs, where suffering can be inflicted invisibly, bureaucratically, through mechanisms most people don't understand. And Venezuela is just one battlefield. Iran, Syria, Cuba, North Korea, Russia, different contexts, same weapons. The question we must ask ourselves, is this justice? Is collapsing economies, starving populations, forcing mass migrations, is this the right way to promote democracy and human rights? Or have we simply found a more palatable way to wage war? One where the bombs don't fall, the bodies don't pile up on camera, and we can all pretend our hands are clean. The invisible war is invisible only to those not looking. The victims see it clearly, they feel it every day. This is their story. This is America versus Venezuela. This is the war that's still being fought right now, while the world scrolls past. Wars fought with sanctions, instead of soldiers still shatter lives. Wars fought with economic pressure, instead of explosions still kill. But they don't make the evening news. They don't trend on social media. They remain invisible, unless we choose to see them. This is not about defending Maduro or condemning America. This is not about taking sides. This is about recognizing that 7 million people have been displaced, that millions more suffer daily, and that we, all of us, have a responsibility to understand how and why. The invisible war will continue until we make it visible, until we demand accountability, until we recognize that in the 21st century, you can destroy a nation without firing a shot. And that makes the destruction no less real, the suffering no less devastating, and the moral questions no less urgent. The war you never knew was happening is happening still.